Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Astrology Today with Jeff Harmon. And of course, I'm Ella. Gosh, Tuesday, midterm elections, right? We're going to jump right in. We've had a couple people ask who is going to take this election? Which side is going to take this election? Take it away.
All right. It away, Jeff. Well, first off, I want to answer that question because we had someone that actually several people have been asking me this. So I selected one chart that really was pretty discernible to go by, and I'm keeping the names off the chart so nobody can see who it is. And I can tell you this, that I'll put the chart up in just a minute, that it's definitely going to be a very tricky election. I would not be surprised if we see some real deception. Now, God, have we ever seen that before on an election? No.
Deception? Oh, my goodness.
Deception, yeah. Who would ever do that, right? So, yeah, God forbid. No, it's undemocratic to even say that, right? So anyways, I'll put the chart up real briefly here. And you can see here when I go to it, this is the question, who will win the House and the Senate? Which party will win? So when it was asked, it was the Eastern horizon is always the querent. And you can see up here that it's Aries rising. This was, of course, using more the Egyptian type of astrology called interrogation. And we could look at it in Vedic astrology too, but this one, we'll stick with this tonight. So the bottom line is the ruler of the ascendant is retrograde, which means that there's some things returning back to where it was. That also can mean there's subterfuge going on. Again, would anybody believe there's any subterfuge going on in any election? Never heard of that in the history of the human race. Nobody would ever do that, right? So, and most importantly, the Lord of the Ascendant, Mars, is squaring Neptune. Well, like we said in the last podcast, Neptune is always deception. It's blowing smoke up your rear end and telling you it's a clear day, right? So there's going to be some deception. Clearly, this chart shows they've already caught people. They've been catching people filling ballot boxes, and there were stuff full in certain parks. And I've heard all kinds of stories already. So we're definitely going to see some voter manipulation here. But that still doesn't answer the question. The question is who is going to win? Well, the person who asked this was apparently Republican. Okay, so when you ever ask a question about a contest, you always ask for either your team, your horse, whatever you're asking about, right? Your person in the fight, your fighter, right? And the seventh house becomes your opponent. And this is an election, right? You're going to have a winner and a loser, right? It's a contest. So what was interesting is the Lord of the seventh is Venus. And what is it doing? Well, it's squaring Saturn, Lord of the 10th. What does that mean? That's not a good omen for the Democrats. And again, I'm just reading the chart. I'm not going to get into being Republican or Democrat. I don't care about that. My job is just to read the chart. So it really kind of shows a lot of deception is going to be happening. We're probably not going to have the answer immediately. But, and of course, Biden and the rest of the guys are already telling us that. Well, we're not going to have the answer right away. Well, we should have the answer right away. If they did it by paper ballots, we would.
At least. Yeah,
exactly. So that's the first answer. The second one is the moon is always co-ruler of the question. And the moon just happens to be making a nice sextile to the 10th house ruler, which is the government. See, the 10th house is always those in power and governance. So it shows here that I would tend to say this chart leans towards the Republicans taking a majority and also the of both the Senate and the House. That's what it leans towards. And I can only tell you what the chart says. Right. So, but expect manipulation.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we wouldn't expect anything else. Interesting. Can we see in the chart?
I don't care what the chart would say, right?
Right.
They're up to something. We've just got to find it, right?
Just got to find it.
Yeah. Like the old Southern sheriff. I know you're up to something. We've just got to find it.
Well, can we see in the chart how long it might take A couple weeks, a month, 2 months?
Take up to 4 or 5 weeks. I could be wrong on that, but see, we've got a cadent moon. Cadent means it's in the 12th house, and it's sextiling the 10th. So it could take a bit of time before it's fully ironed out. Mm-hmm. Now, that could be days, but I would tend to lean towards we'll have a good idea in probably a week. Like a business week, we'll have a good idea where it's going. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to have a better idea right away, but it's leaning in that direction. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, these things are very complex. And again, we're seeing politics more polarized. This is what we said in the last podcast. We're seeing politics more polarized now than we've seen in probably a long, long time. I mean, let's face it, politics get very polarized. People get emotional. I mean, there's been riots over politics and murders and crazy stuff. In our last podcast, we mentioned that literally in the 1850s, there were people shooting each other, wars, people beating each other to death on the, almost killed a guy on the Senate floor. Yeah. So, we're seeing.
We see any violence in this chart?
More deception in this chart. There could be violence. Let me just make sure I'm right. Yeah, this seems to be more deception than violence. However, with that being said, now you just brought me up to the second thing I wanted to get into that does affect this particular election. And we mentioned this a while back ago, and I think 2 podcasts back, and that is the eclipse. You see, remember, we had a very powerful solar eclipse, meaning on a new moon, which was back, again, on what was it, the 25th of October, right?
Yep.
So here we are on the 8th of November that this election day happens, but we also have a lunar eclipse. Yeah, actually, this eclipse really goes total on the West Coast right around 2:16 a.m. And then it really will be totally like a blood moon. It's going to really be this eerie, dark total eclipse. And then about 3:41 a.m. approximately, it's going to start to move away. And then it'll start to become a partial eclipse. But the ancients always said that when this happens, 1 hour approximately equals a year, give or take. And if it's an hour and a half, it's about a year and a half that it has its full effect on the earth. So this is going to be a powerful effect for a long, long time. See, you'll see here exactly what I'm talking about in the chart here. It's very, very easy to see. You can see up here. Let me get a good cursor here for you. So this is the sun in the District of Criminals, also known as Washington, D.C., right when it's exact, which is just about, you can see right here, this is called an aspect grid. You can see it says 0A00, which just means it's 0 degrees, 0 minutes approaching. See, those are degrees and minutes, and A means approaching. So it's precise astrologically right at about 6 a.m. So the bottom line is, this is one wackadoodle eclipse. Let me tell you, this thing is off the charts. It's pretty intense. And let me show you something else that takes this down the rabbit hole even a bit more. Here is the United States Sibley chart. Now, I'm going to put up something astrologers call a bi-wheel. It's a very useful tool. Why? Because we're going to put the United States on the inner wheel. We're going to put the full moon eclipse of November 8th on the outer wheel. So what you've got here is the United States on the inner wheel, and the outer wheel is the eclipse. Of course, you can see the same arrangement here, but notice how it's changed. This is happening. If this birth time of the United States is right, I'm using the Sibley chart, and a lot of people have heard me mention before, Sibley is named after a man named Ebenezer Sibley. He's a Mason who is believed to have recorded the time the bells started ringing when all the boys started signing the Declaration of Independence. So the bottom line is, if this is true and this ascendant is correct for the United States, this eclipse is happening in the 6th, 12th house axis of the United States. Plain English, definitely subterfuge. And it also shows the secret manipulation that's going on. And I don't think we need to talk about the media. That was another thing I wanted to bring up in this podcast is, remember, we had someone ask a question, and I kind of laughed when they asked it. They said, do you think the media is skewing information and doing disinformation? And I laughed and said, well, I don't think we need a chart for that one.
Need the astrology, do we?
That's it. That's like asking, will the sun come up tomorrow? So I actually...
It's interesting to see how deep it goes, though, and the astrology will show that.
Yeah, it is. Here's that question. Is the media skewing or omitting stories? Again, do we need a chart for this? But I did examine it. This one, again, the moon was conjuncting Pluto at the midheaven, which means Pluto is absolutely kind of brutal manipulation. They're not skewing stories. They're shoving them down your throat, according to this chart. Moreover, let me just study this here. Yeah. Again, we had Venus squaring Saturn. The answer is, my interpretation was yes. Anytime I've seen a moon Pluto conjunction, and there's also a sextile to Neptune. So the answer is, yeah, it clearly is. And again,
what's awesome is the astrology mirrors what's happening too. Even though like we're saying, well, of course, it's almost like, well, we know kind of, it would be shocking if the astrology wasn't showing what it is, but
yeah,
it mirrors the truth in real time.
Yeah, the secret to astrology, especially the ancient systems, is defining the consciousness surrounding the intent of the question. That's really, really important. See, in this case, it's different than who will win the election. We're talking about media, which is a resource of news, which is third house and also ninth house. And what's interesting about this chart, I'm not showing anymore, but it shows that the public's actually moving away from the media. What have we just heard? We've just heard Colbert, we've heard Jimmy Kimmel, and a bunch of other guys say, well, we've lost half our audience because we've been ripping on Trump. Well, whatever, but you could see the public's distrust is growing much greater. By the answer of this question. And why would I say that? Because the Lord of the Ascendant, again, was going retrograde.
Right.
So that always means someone backing away from something. In this case, is the media. So, there's a couple of interesting questions. So, again, I say to everybody, this is probably one of the most important elections in this country's modern history, for sure, because clearly we, have some really serious economic things that are going to come at us. I mean, if they shut down the petrochemical industry, and remember, I don't believe it's fossil, though coal is fossil, but if they shut down our energy grids, they will kill half the human race here. They really will, both in Europe and here. And it won't take long. You got to remember, during the Great Depression, we had a different world. People had farms. They had gardens in their backyards. How many people have gardens and farms now that they live off of?
Yeah.
Well, the farms have been bought up by the big agro companies or the Chinese. And you've got all of these huge conglomerates. Nobody has. What about the people who are living in the city stacked in apartment complexes? What are they going to do if Whole Foods or Ralph's or, Pavilions or Piggly Wiggly or whatever you got around you doesn't have food?
Yeah.
They will starve. And if they cut off diesel fuel, you could probably start killing people within 30 days because you won't last long without food. You can last a while without food. You really can't last without water. Water, you might make it 3 to 5 days, and that's it. We don't realize.
Stock up and store water like we've both done, right? We have barrels of water.
Yeah. I don't know if it's going to happen, but it could.
Important. For any disaster, you should be prepared, actually.
Yeah, well, especially out here in the land of earthquakes. Yeah.
You want to be prepared. And it's a dicey time.
It's a really dicey time.
Not to be prepared for anything, I feel like.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. They're trying to get wars going right now. This is the owners at the top of the pyramid. And, we also talked about communism. We put on the screen that quote from Lenin, who basically says, we don't care if we kill 3/4 of the human race, as long as the quarter that's left is communist. Right. And you can tell a lot of what's going on now, there's not as much blatant. They're coy about it. They're not just shoving communism in our face. What they're trying to do is set it up so that they actually shut this place down.
Right.
And then
so
they might shove communism
almost
right.
overnight. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Yep. Well, I sure am grateful to the astrology. We've talked about this many times, but it really is such a blessing because it's an interactive consciousness and it really helps us navigate our way through life. And it really does give us, like a heads up in a sense. If, like you're saying, you ask a question coming from a real, genuine place. It's always, I've never not seen it be correct. I just haven't. Yeah. It was awesome to answer those two questions. We definitely want to encourage everyone watching to please don't be shy to ask questions, whatever comes to mind. Definitely. We love to, make this kind of like an interactive channel. Be awesome.
Yeah, and Ella's going to pick it. So if yours doesn't get picked, don't blame me.
You can blame me. That's all right.
There you go. Exactly. No, I'll let her pick it and then we'll do it. It's fun. But this is a powerful time, folks. It really, truly is. And I think it's going to have huge impacts on the economy. I mean, there is no way. I've been mentioning what we're going to do another podcast on economic stuff. I don't want to get into it right now because I want to do a lot more research. But in general, you got to remember the United States is going through times it's never, ever, ever gone through before. You got a Pluto return. This is, again, what divided the Roman Empire 250 years after its inception, approximately. And we're almost that age. We're 246 years old. And this Pluto return is you can't emphasize how powerful this is. And look at what's going on. I mean, you've literally got Biden shutting off every faucet, and now he's threatening to dismantle every coal plant. I mean, maybe they could put wind turbines around Washington. I hear there's a lot of hot air coming out of there and they can run them with that. But I think shutting down coal plants is a really big mistake. If anybody wants to take a trip to a power plant sometime, do so. You will be blown away. I mean, you're talking machines that are bigger than apartment complexes. They're huge. These turbines, these gigantic shafts that run these turbines. I mean, when you look at the power it takes to generate the electricity in our municipalities, you ain't going to hook up a few wind turbines or even a field of them and come close to the power those generate. They are in kilo and megawatts. They're megawatts. That's mega means million. And I know I actually got a chance to work with a company called Asea Power Systems in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, back in the 80s. And it was a fun job. I was working with these engineers and we had to record variances in power line transmissions. They're transmitting some of these power lines are hundreds of thousands of volts, sometimes millions of volts, where they step up. That's where Tesla was a genius. Tesla is the man we can thank for modern distribution of electricity. They generate the power at the power stations, huge amounts of power. And then they step up the voltage to extremely high voltages using step-up transformers. And then they can transmit it miles and miles, hundreds of miles if they want. And they have a voltage drop across the lines. And then they step it down at the other end, and then they step it down even further in your neighborhoods and your alleys and streets and all that on these power line pole transformers. So, and of course, these are the things that blow in hurricanes and all that and earthquakes because they're necessary to step the voltage down even more so that you can use it in your house at either 240 or 110. So the United States is an amazing power distribution system. It's really probably one of the most advanced in the world. Stunning. And he thinks he's going to run this with windmills? I mean, go to a power plant sometime. I don't know. I think he really needs some more Geritol or something.
But that's why I don't see it happening. I don't see it happening. I mean,
Dire times, my folks. This is Pluto return. And it's also the deceptive Neptune square Mars. I'm going to put that back on the screen because I think it's really important for people to see. I'll show you the U.S. Sibley chart again. And also I have up here too, I have the United States Sibley chart. You can see we're also in something called Sade. Sade is a strange word in Sanskrit. If anybody doesn't know what that means, I can tell you. When I first heard it, I said, Sati what? Sati is a strange word in Tamil Sanskrit that means the 7.5-year period during which Saturn, the planet of karma, transits the 12th from the moon, the 1st from the moon, and the 2nd from the moon. So I don't care what astrologer is using what birth time. This is happening to the United States irregardless. See, the sign before the moon is Capricorn. So you can actually see Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. This is Capricorn. If people don't know their signs, this is Aquarius, and that's Pisces. So Saturn right now is transiting the moon's south node, also known as Ketu. What does that mean in plain English? Saturn and Ketu get along about as good as oil and water. That's why it's so divisive and crazy right now in this. And it's been that way for about the last 2.5 years. Does that make any sense? So watch what happens. I'm going to put a time tool up. See, then it's going to go what we call full on the U.S. moon. This is the United States birth chart here on this square box. So watch, if I put up a time tool and you can actually see the night we're doing this is November 6th, right? So if I go forward in monthly increments, there's no December 6th, there's January 6th. Now on the 17th of January, you're going to notice the planet of karma, Saturn, the crossover, the crescent of the moon, is going to jump up where? Over the United States moon. Now watch, there's 14th, 15th, 16th, and bingo, 17th. So Saturn now begins to go over the top of the United States moon. Now you might say, okay, so what? What does that mean? Well, I can tell you, Saturn, I always love to show this diagram. Saturn operates just above our conscious self-awareness. If you look at the glyph of Saturn, it's the cross over the crescent of the moon. And what that means in plain English is it is previously concretized energy, etheric energy that is ready to release. Now, this isn't a person. This is us, the entire collective country of the United States. And what does that mean? That means a lot of karma is going to be releasing on the good old US of A here. Wow. Now, us Westerners, when we hear karma, we always go, karma, it's got to be bad, right? It's got to be bad. Well, it also can be good, and it could be all points in between. So this is the, you could say, divine magic of astrology. And remember, I've always said, I love this diagram. The earth is the soul cauldron. It's truly the place where spirit becomes manifest. And the celestial heavens, what we call the stars and the planets, and even to the flat earthers, it's still divine energy coming down through. So the planets act like literal multidimensional switches. And Saturn was always believed to be the end of our perception of reality of time. See, there is no time, folks. The rotation of the earth on its axis every day is a day. The sun isn't rising and setting. We're rolling around and it appears to be rising and setting to us living on the earth. We're the ants on the ant farm here. So the bottom line is the lunation of the moon goes around the earth once a month, right? And of course, now we're getting an eclipse, very powerful, and the occultation of the lights of the sun and the moon are darkened. It's very powerful, has very powerful meanings. That's where the ancient legend of the dragon came from. So why am I telling you all this? Saturn is believed to be the karmic ending of our perception of reality of time. And many of the ancient Egyptian, Hebrew, Chaldean, and Greek, and also Vedantic texts all say that the souls enter the realm of this dimension through Saturn. And we end up pinging around through incarnation after incarnation after incarnation. And this is very mysterious stuff. And basically, that is this etheric energy we see following lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And once they say the soul has purified, rectified, and experienced enough, it leaves this dimension. Well, why am I going into all this detail? Is because Saturn rules the collective karma of the human race. And it also rules our own personal collective karmas. So when it happens on a country, it tends to release its karma back onto the nation. And this is what's going on. And when this actually happens every 28 and a half years. This is not the first time this has happened to the United States. It's happened every 28 and a half years. You see, it's just like all these cycles repeat. But what hasn't happened to the United States is the confluence of a Pluto return, a Neptune square Mars, and this Sade all within one short time frame, which is now. This has been the last few years. It's never happened before. So this is, I can't emphasize how huge this is. So get out and vote.
Right.
Because,
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, because you're exactly right. Because I don't think there's ever been a time. Yeah, they might tear up your ballot and throw away, but they can't tear them all up and throw them away. And if it's such an overwhelming, wave, it's gonna make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Purifying and rectifying. I love that. We should all be doing that, right?
We all are, whether we're realizing it or not.
Purifying and rectifying. Yes.
And all the hatred and all the anger and all the getting even and the revenge just brings more karma. It just brings more karma. And it's interesting because free will, in the ancient Hebrew, they really had it right, in my opinion. They truly did. The ancient text of the Share Hagilgum, I'll put that on the screen one more time. Share Hagilgum. Oh, by the way, I love this little cartoon. My son sent me this, and I forget who the artist is, but he's a great artist. I want to give him credit here. But I always thought this was pretty accurate.
Really cute.
But yeah, I mean, it's a great little cartoon, but why it's germane is, there's a text called the Share Hagilgum. This is one text of many. The Puranas in India, the Upanishads, so many texts talk about this. And this Share or Sharar means gate or gates. And Hagilgum means cycling of the souls. And it actually talks about the whole realms of karma, not only on each individual person, but collectively. See, the lower conscious mind is known as the nefesh, which is a strange word. See, I always look at the conscious mind as the keyboard, mouse, and screen we're all using to interface with the computer. But on us, it's really the consciousness and the lower conscious mind that is comporting through the Jupiter chakra to our miraculous bodies known as consciousness. You see, but it's not us. You see, the lower conscious mind is kind of the interface that developed in the womb up until now, but it interblends with what we would call the spirit, which is known as Rosh, the upper, or you could say karmic layer of the soul, which is called Neshama. And then you have the really divine portion of the spirit called Haya, and then the upper divinity of the soul. And it's interesting because when you compare this is very important. We are really bleeding down. Our souls are created from here. Are literally, this is the upper dimension of the soul, the lower. This is the Rosh and spirit, and this is the Neshama. So we are literally in the four worlds, and the five layers of the soul parallel this. So it's really interesting stuff, how we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. So, eclipse be damned, all this other stuff. We always get through it. We always get through it. And it's really interesting stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I would say the United States has its own personal karma releasing. And this is one of the most dramatic times ever that the United States has ever existed through. And I think we're going to see that over the next 2 years. And I wanted to finish showing that. If you take the United States Sibley chart and we convert this to the sidereal system, which is Vedic astrology, by the way, and we put up a graphic ephemeris, precession correction actually corrects the precession of the solar system to the sidereal zodiac. So it's called its trip around the central sun, called the precession of the equinoxes. So it's all sidereal. So when I click this view button, watch, we have Neptune squaring Mars. Right there. Is the media deceiving us and the government? You bet they are. That is very much what was happening before the Civil War. It's happening again right now. It doesn't even finish up until this March. So then what's really powerful is the sidereal Pluto return for the United States actually happens in 2024. And that's the election year. So we either going to find this country is not here as we know it by 2024, or it's going to be the phoenix rising out of the ashes. And I say people better vote, or we may not be the phoenix rising out of the ashes. We may be a transformed country that is just got a different name, but it'll turn into a high-tech communism if we're not careful. Mm-hmm. So this is so critical right now.
Well, I know a lot of people have already voted. I'm going to vote tomorrow.
Good.
So a lot of
I noticed when you voted, you said you weren't even asked for an ID.
Oh, no, I wasn't.
Yeah.
I was not.
I don't think I was either.
I was not. Yeah. No.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have a right as Americans to have a secure voting system, and it's clearly, there's nothing wrong with demanding that.
No, there isn't. There isn't. Yeah. I wonder if it's going to just stay like this for the rest of the time. It feels like it is going to stay like this.
Yeah. I mean, it's been traditional history that voting has been skewed,
Yeah. Yeah. I know. So let's vote. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually looked at a ballot. I got mine in the mail, and I looked at it, and I noticed democracy wasn't on the ballot. But what I did notice is candidates were. How about that? Democracy wasn't on the ballot. Every single person on the media has been telling me democracy's on the ballot. I listen to all of them up there. Democracy's on the ballot, or this is about democracy.
You didn't see it, huh?
I didn't see it. I was looking for it. I was hoping democracy was somewhere on the backside or something. Where do I vote for democracy? There's no democracy on the ballot. The only thing I saw was candidates. How about that?
Mm-hmm. How about that?
Deception, folks. Deception.
About that. Well,
Neptune square Mars. See, I know astrology is very obscure. People listening to this are going to go, wow, all this astrology talk he talks about. But it's a language. It's no different than reading a book when we were little kids. Mommy used to read us the book in the bed. Remember that? And you didn't know what she was reading, but you liked the story. So once you understand the syntaxes and you understand the letters and you start learning sentences, that's all astrology is looking at the aspects. It's astronomy. This isn't woo-woo channeling. Yeah, it's astronomy. That's all it is. It's geometric aspects. That's all it is. It's astronomy. Yeah. They used to call astrology astronomy. They stopped doing it. Now it's astrology, right? So
right. And it doesn't require belief either. It doesn't require belief.
Well, a lot of people don't believe it. I don't believe in that stuff. Don't bring this stuff around me, right? I was that way. I don't have
to believe in it. It's happening.
I was that way in the 70s. I actually said that to my mother. I don't believe in that. Come on, how can astrology have any efficacy? And Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, many of our founding forefathers were really into traditional astrology. Yeah. And it's very interesting. I always like to show this since, it's an election time. Here, folks, this is quite interesting. I've shown this on other podcasts, but I like to show it again. This is George Washington actually doing a ceremony with his Masonic apron. And that's over here. See this guy with a block and tackle? He's leaning over, running a rope. That's not a hangman's gallows, folks. That is the cornerstone of the United States Capitol being dropped into its foundation. They did it at an astrological time with a ceremony. This was actually an astrological ceremony dropping that in for the cornerstone of the foundation. I've actually done this for a lot of people. I work on Vastu. A lot of people have heard of Feng Shui, but Vastu is really cool because it balances the energy of your home, of your office. You can even put your office. I have my office facing northeast. Why? Because that's where Jupiter and Mercury is.
Right.
And I need all the help I can get. So
we all do. You've done that for me a lot. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is literally an amazing mural that how much they were in. The kings and queens were in the coronations at certain times. We talked about that last podcast where, we were looking at Liz Truss's. She backed right out of her tenure as prime minister because the time she was inaugurated, now people will say, yeah, but she backed out because she failed. Well, okay, fine. But the time she was inaugurated, it showed that who was ever being signed in, it wouldn't go too well.
It supported that. Right. Exactly.
Totally supported it.
Yeah.
Yep. So, all right. Well, I've said what I got to say, and we had fun here. Yeah. Well, this is great information. And like I said, I'm going to vote tomorrow, and I know everyone's going to get their vote in tomorrow or Tuesday. And let's see how this all plays out. God willing, Yeah, it's a very important election.
Change coming.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, thanks once again, everyone. Please remember to like and subscribe to keep us going here. And please remember to leave your comments and questions. We'll look at them all. And take good care of yourselves. We'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks for listening.